one of the first things, here's one of the first things I want you to consider as we get back to our work here. I want you to think about the fact that if you're in co-teaching settings, if you are involved in teaching students with disabilities in co-teaching settings, it's important to understand that a lot of our students are spending a great deal of their time in the general ed classroom. And so it's very, very important that we're able to think about what specially designed instruction is, and we're able to link good teaching strategies that are evidence and research based to the needs of the student. And that's really what it comes down to. And so we're going to talk a lot about what specially designed instruction is, where its place is, and we're going to talk about the differences in some of the other things that you might have thought qualifies as specially designed instruction, and we'll kind of let you do some work with us as well. So I just wanted you to think about that as a way of starting our conversation today, is that we're spending, our students are spending a great deal of time. 64% of our students with disabilities are spending 80% of their time in the general education classroom. And so our targets for today is to kind of look at the purpose of SDI. What is SDI? What are some strategies that go along with SDI? And then just kind of practice a little bit after looking at some scenarios and help and maybe just thinking about developing some of our own go-to strategies and what our top SDI is and that type of thing. So all children are capable learners regardless of disability. We have to start with that belief, okay? We have to start with that belief. And this has circulated quite a bit in the last few years. This was a slide, it's one-pager slide. It kind of gives you some attention to what specially designed instruction is. And this was done by KDE a few years back. And it puts the definition right in the middle, and it comes right from the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. So specially designed instruction, first and foremost, is regulated. It's a mandated piece of the IEP. And when you talk about it, it has three pieces really: adapting content, methodology, and delivery of instruction. And it's for students with disabilities that have IEPs, and we need to be thinking about strategies to meet their unique needs. And so it also provides access to the general curriculum or the program of studies, as you will see here. And basically, if you want to put a definition to it, it's providing students what they need when they need it. It's providing those unique, for those unique differences, and being able to deliver what they need, and providing equity in the classroom, and also access. And so that's something very, very, very important as we just think about it. Now, one of my favorite tools in this whole scheme of things, and it's been around for a long time, and it was last edited in 2014. It's the IEP Lesson Plan and Development Handbook. And that's a hot link on the left there. So you can click on that thing and it will show you, and you'll be able to use this in just a few minutes. We want you to use it here in just a few minutes to help answer some of the questions that we're going to have you work through. But I just wanted to throw that up there. We refer to this sometimes as the schoolhouse document, because that's got that cartoonish looking red schoolhouse on there, and it makes us think about elementary school and that kind of thing. But really, there's some real good information in here. The first part of it, breaks down the different types of teaching that can qualify as SDI, and it also looks at differentiation and things of that nature. So we'll get into it a little bit here. And then we have another book that we've studied in quite a bit in the last couple of years, come out a couple of years ago by Ann Benninghoff, entitled Specially Designed Instruction. And we use this in a lot of our training. We use it in a lot of our book studies and PLCs. And we're just happy to share this as another resource with you. And we'd like to get you a copy sometime if we can. And, if you are interested in that. But this book really does a good job of breaking down the difference between what universal design for learning is, and what differentiation is, and what SDI is, and how those things work in the classroom, and it gives you some questions to consider. It gives you some scenarios, and we're going to kind of capture some of that information today. So here's just a really good slide. And it really comes from Benninghoff's book. SDI is adapting content, methodology, and delivery of instruction. SDI is not differentiation, accommodation, modification, universal design for learning, or tiered instruction. So I'd like for you to take just a second, and I'd like for you to think about each of these three pieces right here. When we say we're using that big word, adapt, when we adapt content, what does that make you think of? And then when we adapt methods, what does that make you think of? And then what does it make you think of when we say we're going to adapt our delivery of the instruction? Okay, so just in the chat, if you don't care, could you place your answers? Just some, what off the top of your head, what's it make you think of? I'll get us started. So I'm putting my answers in the chat. I'd like for you to do the same. And we've also placed the IEP Lesson Plan and Development Handbook in the chat, so you'll have access to that throughout the presentation. So I've placed some things in the chat. Identifying abilities and the best form of learning. Good, Hannah. That's awesome. And Dr. Bates shared grade level standards and scaffolded instruction. I love it. All those are good answers. I think about the Kentucky Academic Standards. Anytime I think about content, I think about all those standards that kids are expected to be able to work within and make progress within and have access to. Prerequisite skills, Susan Green says. Man, I love that. And, you know, Susan, I appreciate you being here. Susan is a consultant with Floyd County Schools and does a great job out there. I'm hammering that home in every training that I'm conducting this year. It's kind of like one of those pet things that I want to see prerequisite skills and short-term objectives that scaffold and help us to build the overall skill that we're trying to achieve on the annual goal. And so that's a great one. I appreciate that. SDI is a lot of these things. Like it's adapting content. We got to find new ways to deliver content. We got to find ways of chunking content. We got to cut the fluff and teach the stuff, as Anita Archer would say. And then when we talk about methodology, we got to look at what works. Do we know where to find what works? And then when we look at delivery of instruction, are we talking about small group? Are we talking about large group? We're talking about co-teaching. We're talking about resource. We're talking about pacing. What are we talking about when we talk about those things? So this definition is a little bit hard to deconstruct, if you will, for to use a word from the standards side of things. When we look at standards, we try to break those standards down. And when we try to break this definition down, it sometimes is a little bit heavy. And so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and get your thoughts on that as well. Now, one of the things that we want you to do is participate. Okay. So if we ask you to put something in the chat, try to do that for us, because that just is, it's just good engagement and we appreciate the answers that we got. And it's good to see what you had. Don't be afraid. It's a safe space. Just go ahead and put what you think in there. And then we'll try to clarify anything or try to provide any direction that we have as far as what we know. But here's some here's where I come in a little bit with the compliance side of things. If the ARC determines that a student needs SDI, they have an IEP and they need SDI, they need something more than what they're getting in core instruction. They need something more than what they're getting with Universal Design for Learning or differentiated strategies. And we fail to provide that, we're breaking the law. And we're not implementing the IEP. If the ARC determines that a student needs special design instruction and that is not being delivered and we only provide accommodations, we have a caseload full of 504 students. If students are making progress and doing just fine without specially designed instruction, then they probably don't need an IEP. But our point is we need to be thinking about what specially designed instruction is. We need to know how to break it down. So we're going to look at that just a little bit. The what, the why, and the how of specially designed instruction. Again, we got the federal definition repeated over here and kind of broken down for you. So it's a little easier to read and think about that. Adapting content, delivery, and methods. It just keeps coming back. But, why are we doing this? What is it that makes us think about our need to do this? And so down this left-hand side of the page, we see implement students in IEP. Ann Benninghoff says in her book that it's a civil right for students to receive specially designed instruction. And it's something more than what they're getting in core instruction. It's something more than what they're getting in tiers. It's something more than what they're getting with differentiation. Special education students are significantly and consistently below similar age peers. That's why we do it, okay? It's to close skill gaps in academic function and behavior components of the IEP. It's more than core instruction. It's more than differentiation. It's more than universal design, and it's more than tiered intervention. And our whole job as a special ed teacher, it's easy to say this, our whole job. I don't know if you could ever say that in one sentence, but our main job, our most important job, is to be able to match tried and true strategy with diagnosed needs. It's being able to provide the student with what they need at the time that they need it. So let's do a little activity just to check for some understanding. I'm going to throw some statements up here and you put in the chat whether it's true or false. It says SDI is whenever the special ed teacher reads a test for a student. What do you think? Oh, Dr. Bates says false. I'm getting a lot of false? Yes. So what would that be when a special ed teacher reads a test for a student? What do we call that? How do we categorize that? Yes, Hannah, it's an accommodation. Okay. So accommodations have their place and there's nothing wrong with accommodations, but they're not specially designed instruction. Okay, let's go with the next one. SDI is the same as universal design for learning. Now, universal design for learning is a concept that came along from architecture, and it's a kind of it's a concept that allows teachers to pre-plan for differences and to allow students to show what they know in a variety of ways and have choice. And you have choice in the content, you have choice in the products, you have choice in the process and the assessments. And so what do you guys think? Special design instruction is the same as universal design. Put it in the chat. Everybody's on top of it. Hi, Brooklyn. I see you popping in there. Good to have you from over in Leslie County. Yes. And let's go to the next one. SDI is a strategy for differentiating instruction. Well, that one is a little tricky. Is it true or false? What do you think? You can unmute if you'd like and just say it. I'm going to say it's false. Because even though there's elements, oops, I didn't mean to click. Even though there's elements of differentiation and specially designed instruction, it is not, in a sense, specially designed instruction. And the goals on the IEP should be the focus of the SDI. Is that true or false? This is an important one. Yes. Start seeing the T's come in there. I see, oh, there's a lot of T's coming in. Good. So yes. The goals on the IEP should in fact be the focus of SDI. And of course, accommodations are not SDI. So we kind of just check for understanding there, let you have something to think about and to kind of get in your mind what special design instruction is and what it's not. So some questions that we might want to consider here when we're thinking about SDI is how will we determine what SDI we're going to provide? What data do we need? Where will we find the strategies? How do we establish the routines that ensure SDI is being delivered? And as a result, data collection should be easier. Those are all things, that last one's a statement really, but those are all things to consider. A few years ago, I asked the question in a training with a bunch of experienced special education teachers. They were mainly high school teachers because I think it was a transition training. And I asked the question. I said, "Hey guys, how do you spend the majority of your day?" And they said unequivocally, we spend the majority of our time helping students get their assignments done, and we help them, we accommodate them, we read to them, we provide accommodations. And so that I wanted to make sure that you understand that providing accommodations has its place, but it's not specially designed instruction. Now, Benninghoff provided us with this nice little graphic organizer, little info shot, if you will. And she puts on the what's, the 3 what's is to adapt content, methodology, delivery of instruction. The 3 whys is to meet the unique needs of the student, provide access to the curriculum, and meet the standards. Now, and the important thing there is meeting standards. We've got to figure out how to provide access and how to do the strategies and how to match the strategies to the needs of the student and how to teach them something that is going to link to their IEP goals, provide progress monitoring that is generalizable, that they can take with them, that it's skills that we're building that they can take with them to other places in the school building or to home, and it's going to lead to independence. And we understand that it's not graphic organizers, it's not extended time, it's not focus tools, it's not note-taking guides, it's not individual schedules, but it's actually teaching the students skills and closing gaps. So right here in the center of this, it says it's IEP driven right there on that little car. I love that graphic and that visual. But if you notice, the SDI is only for students with IEPs. Now, students with IEPs get all these things in these layers, but only the students with SDI get specially designed instruction. And so we have guiding questions that go along with this. Is it special? Is it layered on top of core instruction? Does it differ in content, method, and delivery? Does it address unique student needs? And our present level should point you to those differences in the student needs. We should be able to say currently what the student can do, and we should know what the deficiencies are and what the needs are and the concerns are and where they're actually functioning, what grade level they're working on, what, how much of a percentage of reading comprehension questions they can answer at a particular level, those types of things. And it has to be, special design instruction should be related to the annual measurable goal. It's intentional toward that progress of that goal. And on this slide, it says, are we collecting data to measure progress? This is how we know that we're doing something that is going to ensure that we're measuring the goal, we're taking data around the goal, and what does our formative assessment look like? What does it look like around that goal? And when and how do we take that to show progress or to guide instructional change? Is it intentional, designed to bring about progress? Is our SDI growing skills that can be used in other places? Is it skill driven? I'm sorry, clicked ahead too soon. Does it build independence? Do we teach how the thinking behind graphic organizers and mnemonics are done? And is it something that we can use over and over and over again? So that's really the nuts and bolts of what determines what our specially designed instruction should look like. So when we plan for SDI, we have to ask ourselves some other questions. Are we clear about what the learning target is? Have we clarified the learning target for our students? When we do our lesson opener, when we do our bell ringers, do we clearly establish what is going to be going on today? Do the students understand the language that we're using? Do we need to do some pre-teaching of the vocabulary? Do we need to check for understanding? And certainly we need to set students up for tons of success early in the lesson so that through that engagement and through their answering questions and through us taking data, we're checking for understanding, we're checking for readiness for the new concept that we're about to teach, but we're also providing them with an opportunity to back channel just a little bit and show us what they learned yesterday, and then also let them know where we're headed. So that's what we do when we clarify the learning target. And then when we look at a lesson and when we're looking at a co-teaching model, do we understand that we need to have a conversation with that co-teacher, and we need to ask the question, what do all students find difficult with this lesson? What do all students find difficult with this skill? And then we need to find out what the process is that the student that's successful is using. And we need to model that, and we need to teach that to our special needs students. And in the process of doing this, we need to model a ton that new concept or that new way of doing things. And we need to make sure that we are providing them with tons of examples and tons of scaffolding and tons of opportunities to practice and to respond during the lesson. And that once we do that, then we check for understanding often, and we use that data to drive our next steps. If they're not getting it, we may need to be backing up and doing another practice turn. And so as we develop specially designed instruction, we need to be thinking about developing our top specially designed instruction pieces and what they are, what they look like. But one of the things that we know that research tells us is that the opportunities to respond, high level success early in the lesson, setting up students for clear learning targets, and taking data and checking for understanding often after modeling a new skill is so, so important. And when our students with disabilities, when they really have trouble, it's really related lots of times to cognitive overload. It's really related to the skills or the targeted skill or the targeted concept that we're trying to grasp is a little heavy for them to take in. So we got to back it down just a little bit, and we got to break it down just a little bit, and we got to teach them vocabulary that goes along with the lesson. or we got to pre-teach that vocabulary that goes along with the lesson, or we have to maybe look at some prerequisite skills that might be missing, and we might need to fill in the gaps. We may need to provide them with some access tools. We may need to thinking about executive functioning in terms of, is the student ready for this? Can they manage themselves? Can they stay on task long enough to get something from the lesson? And so when we find those things, we got to roll that all into one, and we have to say, okay, now the student's ready. Now this is what we can do to provide them with that teaching that's intentional to the goal, that takes into consideration all their needs, and how can we do that while we're also boosting their participation. So we got to have many lessons. We got to build many lessons that have tons of opportunities for students to respond. I write something, you write something. I say something, you say something. Learning and teaching is an interactive process, and we must think about that with our students, and we must provide them with all the elements that are expected in that little graphic. As we back up, we want to look here just really quickly at that graphic. Our students get all of these elements, but then when we get to specially designed instruction, it becomes intentional to the goal. And so we have to be thinking about how we're going to bring about progress, how we're going to teach them. What's a good example? A good example of that might be, a mnemonic device or a graphic organizer, how we would teach them the metacognitive processes and the thinking behind developing those things, and teaching them the processes for that. Accommodation would be just to provide them with a graphic organizer. But if we're talking about actually doing specially designed instruction, we've got to break that graphic organizer down and really teach the process behind creating their own. And then we have build a skill that's going to be adaptable to all settings, and it's going to provide some independence, and it's going to create some things for them that they're going to need in terms of attacking the new concept that's being taught. So let's practice a little bit. Now, you have access to the lesson plan and development handbook. And I'm just going to throw up a scenario here. And I want you to take the scenario and I want you to think about it. You're going to have some information. It's not a tremendous amount of information, but it puts you in a ballpark, and then it gives you a goal. So you're going to develop a strategy that's intentional toward that goal. So here's the scenario. The students in the MMD student, mild mental disability student, have a full-scale IQ that's 70 or below, and you can see it's a 65 here. And then you see all the different areas of the WISC. The working memory index is 72. That means that the student has difficulty holding information in their working memory long enough to apply it to another undertaking or endeavor. So, for example, that might be something like their working memory is deficient, so that and their deficiency in phonics has kept them from being able to read words fluently. And when they can't read fluently because of that working memory deficiency, by the time they get to the end of the sentence, they can't remember the first word they read or any of the context of what they read. So just looking at this scenario, academic achievements there, reads at second grade level. The students in the 5th grade, they struggle with abstract language and problem solving. And their goal is to get given visual supports while in a small group, the student will correctly answer 90% comprehension questions about a third grade text on 4 out of 5 trials, as measured by a weekly CBM probe. I want you to use the schoolhouse document or a device, or you can use AI, or you can use whatever. And I want you to come up with a couple of strategies that you would use that would be specially designed instruction based on our definition based on breaking down the content, breaking down the delivery, breaking down the methods. So I want you to find a method or a strategy that will work with this student. And in the schoolhouse document, you can access that, and it breaks it down by reading comprehension. It breaks it down by basic reading. It breaks it down by listening comprehension. It breaks it down even by attendance. And you've got supplementary aids and services, what the student needs on the right, and on the left-hand column, you've got specially designed instruction. Or you can use a device and you can Google it or chat GPT it or whatever you want to do, and you can place your answer in the chat. But I want to know what strategy you would apply for this student. So let's take just a few minutes and think about this. Take time to read it really carefully. Come up with strategies. Use your tools to come up with additional strategies. I'll give you some time here. It really works better if you place some things in the chat, but you got plenty of time here. No rush. But we want some SDI, and we want you to kind of explain, hopefully, why you're using what you're using. So as you're working through this, you're thinking it's strategies that are intentional to the goal, strategies that are going to bring about data. You're thinking about your delivery of your instruction. Are you going to use explicit instruction model? You're thinking about how you're going to group your students. Do you need to think about pace? Do you need to think about ability grouping or lack of ability grouping, mixed ability groups? All right, I'm going to give you just about another minute or two to develop. Start seeing that chat light up a little bit. Story mapping and progress monitoring. I love it. Ashley, would you like to unmute and tell us why you would use story mapping? You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. Thank you, Ashley, for that answer. Anybody else have answers to put in the chat? Focusing on key questions. I like that. I like that.
With story mapping, it provides visuals so the students can also see.
Yes. Yes, that's fantastic. And so what are some of the other things that we might do here? Focusing on key questions. I like that. And I'm just thinking about the students reading at a second grade level. They're in the 5th grade. Oh, there we go. Pre-teaching that vocabulary. Think alouds to help students come. Yeah. What about repeated reading or those are all good ones. Better and all good answers we're getting in the chat. I appreciate it. What else is out there? You know, I think about having students, you know, I would want to chunk the story maybe and break down the story into a manageable piece for a student that has MMD, a peer buddy. Okay. So they could talk about it back and forth. You could have some questions, prompt them back and forth. I like that, Tanya. So I was just trying to think out loud as far as segmenting and summarizing and reading as they go. They may need some adaptable things too, you know, like some highlighting and you know, that pre-teaching that vocabulary I think is huge. So let me put this up. This is some of the things that I came up with. And I provided the evidence base here as well. So teaching the students to use visual and context clues with explicit modeling and scaffolding. And then you would check for understanding there often with that. And then the studies indicate that teaching context clues strategies improves comprehension for students with intellectual disabilities. And that's from a recent study done by several people in 2016. And then chunking information, breaking down passages in smaller sections with simplified language. And so those are, you know, the point I want to make here is it's not enough just to find something. It has to be something that has some research base to it, but it also has to match what the student needs. And so sometimes we're diagnosers of, okay, this student has this problem, you know, and I'm thinking, if I'm looking back to that goal, I'm thinking, wow, he's going to need some explicit phonics instruction. I don't think there's any question there that he's going to need some of that. He's going to need some practice in fluency. He's going to need some vocabulary instruction. So when you go to write this goal, and this might be an academic goal that is for a whole year, we also have to think about the prerequisite skills that are going to build that in. And when we're looking at those strategies that are going to work, we're thinking about things like pre-teaching vocabulary, chunking information, teaching context clues, repeated readings, segmenting, summarizing, using a peer buddy, excuse me, think alouds. I love all that. And so those are really, really awesome ideas. I think we have time to do maybe just one more. And so this is a second student. Excuse me. And this is a SLD student. Reads fluently at grade level, but has deficits in reading comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, leading to a 3rd grade performance in written responses. So this one changes the academic target a little bit. And then his goal is given direct vocabulary instruction. student will independently use 10 new vocabulary words in complete sentences with 80% accuracy on 3 of 4 consecutive trials measured by twice weekly probes. Now, you notice the way we're writing those goals. We got all 6 components in there. Is it measurable? He's going to write complete sentences, right? And use new vocabulary words. So what would you do here in terms of specially designed instruction? So I gave you a little preview. I scaffolded you a little bit there. Little bit of struggle here. But just thinking about a student that's got a little bit higher full scale IQ, and we didn't include the full scale IQ, but you can see that it's going to be a little bit higher than the last student. This student's an SLD student. If he has these scores, he's going to have a written expression score that's probably going to hover in the 50s if they're using the discrepancy model to find him eligible. And so when you look at it, what is it he can't do? He can't. He can't comprehend. He's having a struggle with vocabulary acquisition. And then also writing sentences. So what are some things you would do? I'm thinking about the writing process. I'm thinking about creating sentences. I'm thinking about spelling. I'm thinking about being able to put words in sequence, semantics, and that type of thing. So here's some suggestions for specially designed instruction. Explicit vocabulary instruction using semantic mapping and repetition to reinforce word meaning. And the research supports explicit vocabulary instruction as an effective intervention for students with learning disabilities, and graphic organizers, incorporating tools like Frayer models to aid understanding of vocabulary terms. Graphic organizers improve vocabulary acquisition and comprehension, and then in turn, that's going to help him to be able to write the sentences. I started getting some answers in here. Repetitive vocabulary words, vocabulary list, chunking. I appreciate your answers. It really makes it better when you put your answers in there and we can have a conversation rather than me just talking to you. I appreciate it very much. Now, I just want to think about some overall specially designed instruction. I want to think about some of my go-to specially designed instruction things. Research supports explicit instruction everywhere you turn. If it's teaching phonics, it's to teach it explicitly. It's to model it. It's to scaffold it. It's to allow a ton of practice, a ton of feedback, and a ton of check for understanding, and then do the process over. And our students with disabilities need a lot of practice and a lot of we'll go on through this just a little bit. They need a lot of practice. They need a lot of work in that area. So embedded vocabulary instruction is huge. Allowing students and providing lessons within those goals that give them tons of opportunities to respond. Just keep in mind that instruction it's not a spectator sport, and it's something that where you need to be allowing your students to give you responses often. Sometimes our students lack executive functioning skills, and you need to think about things like working memory. So many times students with disabilities have deficient working memory, and we need to think about the use of retrieval of information from a blank slate. And what I mean by that is every little thing you do, get in the habit of checking them for understanding and checking them for remembering things, and have them throughout your lessons stop and say, okay, can you tell me the first 3 things we talked about? Or Can you tell me the first three things in this concept? Or can you remember what you ate this morning? Or, what did you learn in your previous class? Can you tell me two things you learned? But having them recall from a blank slate is so, so powerful. And it's one of the top things that we should be doing. But teaching those executive functioning skills, our students come to us deficient in so many ways of being able to manage their own emotions, being able to regulate and cope, being able to stay on task, being able to set goals, being able to get along with their peers, and then also dealing with deficient working memory can be so detrimental to their success. So as you set your lessons up, you want to think about having lessons that have tons of checks for understanding, tons of modeling, tons of scaffolds built in, tons of examples and non-examples, worked examples, tons of manipulative use, hitting those preferred learning styles. I'm a visual learner. I like lots of visuals. And then being able to point back to, as a good practitioner of SDI, where did I find my research? Or where did I find my strategy? Does my strategy have a research base? And so I put, on this next slide right here, how SDI aligns with evidence-based practices. We have peer-reviewed articles and meta-analysis from journals like the Journal of Special Education and Learning Disabilities, and then What Works Clearinghouse is always a good one, and National Center on Intensive Intervention. So we need to be able to make sure that what we're using works. We know explicit instruction works. We know that tons of vocabulary instruction works. We know that breaking down skills into manageable parts and chunking works. We know those things work, but where do we get that? Where do we get that? What's our research base for that? And being able to say that and being able to show that. So in review, if we go back to a previous slide here, and we realize that our specially designed instruction is special. It's something that's different from core instruction. It's linked to IEP goals. It brings about progress monitoring and data. It's true instruction. It's not providing just accommodations. It's generalizable. It's something we can use, we can take with us, like those mnemonic devices or those graphic organizers. And the ability to build our own and teaching them leads to that independence, and it leads to success in other areas of school. And that's what we're after. And then if we look at the planning steps for SDI, being able to clarify the learning target, being able to pinpoint the difficult moments in the lessons and in the new concepts, being able to choose IEP goals to address within that lesson and finding the time to do that sometimes is difficult. Being able to identify the thinking behind the processes. What does it take to build a graphic organizer? And what's the thinking behind a successful learner's ability to solve the math problem or to find the main idea? We've got to really work on those things. And then, attending to those access skills really is adapting our teaching so that we also include those executive functioning pieces that are missing for our students. And we know that by looking at our psychological reports. We know that by looking at our testing, our evaluation information, and it really clues us in on what are those gaps and what are causing those gaps. And so super, super important to be able to do that. So when we think about the difference between, lots of times we've heard about high leverage practices and we've heard about evidence-based practices. And I always think, what's the difference between a high leverage practice and an evidence-based practice? Well, a high leverage practice, there's a book on that, Cedar and the Council for Exceptional Children put out a few years ago. And we have a lot of these books at KVEC. But the high leverage practices have things like explicit instruction, ongoing progress, PBIS. They're much larger conceptually. Okay, so they're like a system. PBIS is a system. If we're looking at collaboration, we're looking at parent and family collaboration. We're just, and then we break it down to an evidence-based practice. we would break that down to, we're going to do some parent training on behavior. If we're looking at PBIS, it might be establishing routines. If we're looking at ongoing progress, it might be that we're using curriculum-based measures as opposed to duration recordings. If we're looking at instruction, it might be explicit instruction, but then when we get to the evidence-based practice, we're looking at a particular phonics program like Orton Gillingham. So those are some things that I wanted you to know about the difference between high leverage practice and evidence-based practices. As we continue to become a more professional practitioner, we need to know where to get our strategies from. And so these are great places to start. And it's certainly something that's very, very important. So I want you to reflect for just a minute. What are your takeaways today? What did you like? What questions do you have about specially designed instruction? And what did you learn? And you can place those answers in the chat for us. And then also, we'd like for you to, if you have any questions, please ask us those questions. And then, it's time for the holidays. I want to say happy holidays to everyone. And just place some feedback we're going to put the feedback link in the chat. And we're also going to have it here on the screen so you can give us some feedback. We appreciate you being here today. Specially designed instruction is what teachers do that's different from anything else that teachers do in core instruction, universal design for learning, differentiation, and tiered instruction. It's intentional to the goal. It's going to bring about data. It's going to bring about progress. It's going to be generalizable. And it's going to be strategy driven that has an evidence base to it that we know it's something that works. Pumpkin pie is my favorite, by the way. So I'm just threw that in there. I hope you guys have a great holiday. Please put some feedback in there, and we're done as far as I'm concerned. And I appreciate you being here with us at KVEC today. And if you don't care, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Bates, and you can do some feedback here for us.
I just want to say great job, Mr. May. Good information. And I loved the engagement. And I loved all the great responses that everyone shared. So great job from everyone. I did drop the link in for the feedback also in the chat, but I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. The engagement was fantastic, and I hope each of you have a very Merry Christmas. And great job, Mr. May.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you and Chastity being here from the staff and supporting us always. And engagement's where it's at. You get opportunities to respond, having people practice. That's good, specially designed instruction. And Merry Christmas to all of you. So we'll be signing off.